April 15, 1945. Southwest of Bergen, Nazi Germany, British tanks pushed through the gates of what felt like hell itself, Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. What they uncovered would haunt them forever. 13,000 decomposing bodies scattered like discarded dolls and 60,000 living skeletons barely holding on to life. Among the captured Nazi figures that day was a 22-year-old woman whose beauty concealed something far darker. Her name was Irma Grese, and her story chills to the core. But what's even more shocking is this wasn't her first spree of brutality. The horrors at Bergen-Belsen were only the final chapter of a blood-soaked path that stretched across 3 years and multiple death camps. And the disturbing reason she became a mass killer is something almost impossible to believe until the full story unfolds. Before we step deeper into this unsettling history, make sure you're subscribed to Veil History and turn on notifications. We bring forward the darkest truths history tried to bury, and what comes next is something you won't want to miss. October 7th, 1923. In the small German town of Recklinghausen, a baby girl was born. No one could have imagined that this child would become one of the most sadistic figures in history. Irma Grese grew up in a modest dairy farming family, the third of 5 children in what seemed like an ordinary home. But ordinary would never define her future. Her father Alfred strongly opposed the growing Nazi movement. As Hitler's propaganda spread rapidly in 1933, children across Germany were drawn into Nazi youth organizations. But not the Grace children. Alfred refused to let them join, even when they pleaded. He didn't realize he was trying to restrain something already forming beneath the surface. But escaping such influence was nearly impossible when it existed in classrooms, radio broadcasts, and daily life. German schools became centers of indoctrination. Hitler's image loomed over classrooms like a distorted authority figure. Textbooks normalized hatred as casually as mathematics. Young Irma absorbed it all like poison soaking into her mind. Then tragedy struck, and this marked the turning point. In 1936, when Irma was just 13, her mother took her own life after discovering her husband's affair. The person who might have grounded her morally was gone, leaving her with a father who became increasingly violent, using physical punishment as discipline. The result was a toxic mix, a broken home, relentless indoctrination, and violence shaping her worldview. School became unbearable. She was bullied harshly, her grades dropped, and by 14 she dropped out entirely. This insecure, isolated teenager drifted through odd jobs, months on a farm, months in a shop, searching for direction. But something darker was waiting. At 15, Irma began working at the Hohenlychen Sanatorium as an assistant nurse. This was no ordinary medical facility. It was led by Dr. Karl Gebhardt, a Nazi physician known for brutal medical experiments. For 2 years, Irma worked under him, witnessing and gradually becoming part of something horrific. Records later suggested she wasn't just observing, but actively involved. She wanted to become a nurse, but poor academic performance ended that dream. Instead, she was sent back to factory work, operating machinery on a farm. Imagine the frustration building inside her, growing day by day. At 17, she was filled with resentment, ready to channel it somewhere destructive. July 1942. The gates of Ravensbrück concentration camp opened, and Irma stepped into her true role. Ravensbrück was the primary women's camp in Nazi Germany, where over 132,000 women were imprisoned and more than 90,000 died. It became a training ground for cruelty. Under the supervision of Dorothea Binz, guards were taught a brutal rule: extract maximum labor until prisoners collapse, then push further. Ravensbrück trained thousands of female guards who carried this cruelty across Europe. It also exposed Irma once again to medical horrors under Dr. Gebhardt. Women were subjected to experiments where bones were shattered, wounds deliberately infected, and limbs amputated without anesthesia. Many died in agony, others survived with permanent damage. Irma assisted in these procedures. She heard the screams, saw the suffering, and instead of turning away, something inside her responded differently. The bullied girl now had control, and she embraced it. In 1943, during a visit home, she told her father about her work. Furious, he beat her and demanded she never return. But it was already too late. In March 1943, she was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where her brutality escalated beyond imagination. Auschwitz was a system built for mass extermination, thousands processed daily. It was here Irma earned the nickname, the Beautiful Beast. Survivors described her as strikingly attractive, with a calm, almost angelic appearance. But behind that was something terrifying. She discovered power in harming those who couldn't resist. She carried a whip and used it freely, beating prisoners without reason. Even when ordered to stop, she continued. By 1944, she became a senior guard, overseeing tens of thousands of prisoners in overcrowded, inhumane conditions. Prisoners were forced to stand for hours, carry heavy loads, endure freezing roll calls, and suffer constant punishment. Irma imposed these conditions with intensity. Her cruelty extended beyond physical violence. She manipulated, selected prisoners for death, and reportedly showed particular hostility toward those she viewed as rivals in appearance. She used trained dogs to attack prisoners and watched without emotion. Yet there were contradictions. One young prisoner was repeatedly spared, suggesting fragments of personal association still lingered within her. Still, these moments didn't define her actions. As the war neared its end, she participated in forced evacuations known as death marches. Prisoners collapsed from exhaustion and were executed where they fell. Even in these final stages, she continued her actions without hesitation. In March 1945, she arrived at Bergen-Belsen. Conditions there were catastrophic. Starvation, disease, and overcrowding caused hundreds of deaths daily. Food was minimal. Shelter was inadequate. Despite the collapse of the Nazi regime, Irma continued enforcing harsh treatment. April 1945. British forces liberated the camp. Shortly after, Irma was captured. When questioned, she justified her actions as duty, showing no remorse. During the Belsen trial, numerous witnesses testified against her, describing her behavior in detail. She denied responsibility for deaths, but admitted to violence. The evidence was undeniable. In November 1945, she was sentenced to death. On December 13, 1945, she was executed. She was 22 years old. Her story remains one of the most disturbing examples of how ideology, environment, and personal factors can shape human behavior in extreme ways. It forces reflection on how such individuals emerge and how societies allow such systems to exist. The victims deserve remembrance. Their suffering stands as a warning. History does not exist to shock alone, but to remind.